Have you ever felt like your peace of mind is slipping away little by little without you even realizing it? Like your days are filled with so much worry about family, about what people might think, about whether you're doing enough, that you hardly have time to just sit still and breathe? If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. A lot of us reach a point in life, especially after 60, where we start to look back and wonder why we spent so much time caring about things that in the end never really mattered. Now, don't get me wrong. Caring is a beautiful thing. It shows you have heart. But caring too much about the wrong things? That's a different story. That's when caring becomes a burden. And often that burden doesn't come from love. It comes from fear. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being enough. And the truth is, those fears have a way of sticking with us for decades if we don't learn how to let them go. You've lived long enough to know that life doesn't slow down. The years keep moving, whether we're enjoying them or not. And the last thing you want is to look back and realize you lived more for other people's comfort than for your own peace. So today, we're talking about something that might just shift your entire mindset. It's this simple truth. The less you care about the wrong things, the happier you become. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Picture yourself walking through a garden, carrying a heavy backpack. In that bag, you've got all your worries. What your neighbor thinks of you, what your grown kids expect, whether your choices make everyone happy. It's heavy, isn't it? And you keep carrying it because you feel like you're supposed to. But what would happen if you set that bag down? What if you gave yourself permission to care less about things that steal your joy and care more about what brings you peace? Let's talk about that. Because this stage of life isn't just about growing older, it's about growing lighter. It's about realizing that your time, your energy, your happiness, they're too valuable to waste on people or problems that don't give anything back. And yes, that includes people who only show up when they need something, or who always have something to say about your life, but never actually live it with you. Some of us were raised to always put others first, to stay quiet, to be agreeable, to keep the peace even if it meant sacrificing our own. And for a while, that might have worked. Maybe it helped you keep your family together or hold on to a job. But now you have earned the right to stop living on everyone else's terms. You've earned the right to protect your energy, your space, your time. And the beautiful thing is, when you start caring less about pleasing others, you open the door to pleasing yourself. That doesn't mean being selfish. It means being honest. It means asking, is this relationship, this habit, this worry, adding joy to my life, or draining it? You'd be surprised how many of us carry around responsibilities we never agreed to simply because we think we're supposed to. We keep showing up for people who wouldn't notice if we stopped. We say yes when we want to say no. And every time we do, we trade a little bit of our happiness for someone else's convenience. But here's something I want you to take to heart. You don't need to explain your peace. You don't need to justify your joy. If you want to spend your afternoon sitting in the sun, reading a book instead of answering phone calls, do it. If you want to say no to family gatherings that leave you feeling drained, say no. And if someone gets upset because you chose your own well-being over their expectations, that says more about them than it does about you. You've probably noticed this. The more you try to please people, the more they expect. It's like pouring water into a bucket with holes. You never quite fill it no matter how much you give. And when you finally run out, who's there to fill your cup? That's why setting boundaries, emotional, mental, even physical, isn't just helpful. It's necessary. It's the only way to protect the parts of you that are still vibrant, still full of life, still yours. Some people might call that tough love. I call it wisdom. The kind of wisdom you only gain by living. Because you know now that not everyone deserves access to your kindness. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace over pressure. You're not here to be everything to everyone. You're here to be true to yourself. Now, that's not always easy, especially when we're used to measuring our worth by how needed we are. But I want to challenge you. Next time you catch yourself thinking, "What will they think if I don't do this?" Ask instead, "How will I feel if I do?" That's the question that matters most. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who lives with the choices you make. You're the one who goes to bed with those thoughts, those regrets, those quiet moments where the truth finally has room to speak. And that truth? It's telling you that your time is too short and too precious to spend proving yourself to people who will never fully see you. The people who truly love you, the ones who matter most, they won't need you to sacrifice your joy just to be accepted. They will support you because you choose what's best for you. They won't demand that you shrink just to make them comfortable. So here's something to remember. It's okay to disappoint people who expected you to live their version of your life. It's okay to walk away from conversations that leave you drained. It's okay to say no without explaining, to rest without guilt, to make peace your top priority. Because you know what's more important than being liked? Being free. You've got nothing to prove anymore. You've done your part, you've carried the weight, you've shown up for others. Now, it's time to show up for you. Let's keep going. So, let's talk about what happens when you really start living that truth. When you stop giving so much of your heart, your energy, and your time to people or problems that don't give anything back. Something shifts. It's subtle at first. Maybe you sleep better. Maybe your chest doesn't feel so heavy. Maybe you find yourself smiling, not because something extraordinary happened, but because you finally feel like yourself again. That's not coincidence. That's clarity. That's peace stepping in where pressure used to live. Now, I know this can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you've spent most of your life being the dependable one, the fixer, the one everyone could count on. And there's a beauty in that, no doubt. But here's the catch. Who's been there for you in the same way? Think about it. When you were exhausted, who made sure you were okay? When your spirit felt heavy, who helped lift you up? And when you needed someone to lean on, who actually showed up? Sometimes the answer hurts. Sometimes we realize we've been pouring into cups that never once poured back into ours. And that kind of realization isn't just sad, it's liberating. Because once you see it, you can stop doing it. You can stop hoping that certain people will change. You can stop expecting those who never showed up to suddenly start. And you can start giving that time, that care, that tenderness to yourself. One of the most freeing things you'll ever do is stop expecting people to love like you love. Not everyone has your heart. Not everyone carries the same sense of responsibility or loyalty that you do. And that's not your fault. It's just a fact. Some people were raised on survival, not connection. Some were taught to take, not give. And others simply haven't grown enough to offer anything meaningful in return. That doesn't make you unworthy, it makes them unready. But still, we keep giving, don't we? We keep showing up. We keep answering calls, running errands, biting our tongues just to keep the peace. We keep trying to be the glue that holds everything together, even as we feel ourselves falling apart. And the thing is, we don't even realize how much of our life we've handed over until we finally take it back. And how do you start to take it back? One moment at a time. You start by listening to that small voice inside that says, "This doesn't feel right." The one that whispers, "I'm tired of this." That voice isn't being selfish. It's being honest. And it's been trying to get your attention for years. The more you ignore it, the louder the resentment becomes. But when you start to listen, really listen, everything changes. Maybe it means canceling a lunch that you only said yes to out of guilt. Maybe it means turning your phone off for the afternoon and just sitting in the quiet with a cup of tea. Maybe it means letting your adult children know that no is a complete sentence and that you're allowed to rest, to recharge, to exist outside of their demands. And yes, some people might not like that. They might get upset. They might call you distant or selfish. But let me ask you something. If the only way they know how to love you is by needing you, are they really loving you? Or are they loving what you do for them? That's a tough question, but it's one we all need to face. Because true connection isn't about dependence, it's about respect. It's about mutual care. It's about showing up for each other because we want to, not because we feel obligated to. The truth is, when you stop overextending yourself, when you stop saying yes just to keep people happy, the wrong people will fade away. But the right ones, the ones who truly value you, they won't need an explanation. They'll respect your time, your boundaries, your energy, and those are the people worth keeping close. Here's something else to keep in mind. You are not a machine. You are not meant to be available 24/7. You are not required to sacrifice your needs for the sake of harmony. And most importantly, your worth is not measured by how much you give or how often you say yes. You were not put on this earth to be liked by everyone. You were meant to live with peace in your heart. Think about how much lighter life becomes when you stop performing. When you stop trying to be what everyone else wants you to be. When you start doing things not because you should, but because they make you feel whole. You don't need to apologize for choosing rest over responsibility. You don't need to explain why you'd rather spend the weekend alone with a puzzle than at a gathering that drains you. And the funny thing is, once you start showing up for yourself like that, without guilt, people will notice. They might not all understand it, but they'll notice. And they'll either rise to meet you with respect, or they'll move out of the way. Either way, you win. Because here's the thing, peace isn't loud. It's not flashy. It doesn't come with applause, but it changes everything. It softens your mind, eases your body, and brings back parts of you that you forgot were even there. When you start caring less about appearances and more about alignment, what feels true to you, you begin to trust yourself again. You start remembering that your time is sacred, your presence is a gift, and your life is yours to live. Let's keep going. You start to notice something beautiful when you give yourself permission to care less about what doesn't serve you. The noise fades, the tension eases, and little by little, joy finds its way back into your life. Not the kind of joy that depends on perfect circumstances or applause, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from knowing you're finally living on your terms. You begin to laugh more freely. You enjoy the small things again. The breeze coming through the window, a good meal you made just for yourself, the feeling of sitting in silence and knowing you don't owe anyone an explanation. That's when you realize you've been holding your breath for years, waiting, worrying, overthinking. But now you're finally breathing again, and it feels good. There's something powerful that happens when you no longer need other people's permission to be at peace. You don't rush to pick up every phone call. You don't feel guilty saying no to invitations. You don't second-guess every decision based on what someone else might think. Instead, you stand a little taller. Your yes carries weight, and your no becomes a sign of wisdom, not defiance. You move differently because you've stopped moving for everyone else. And let's talk about guilt for a moment. That emotion sneaks in every time we choose ourselves, doesn't it? We say no, and guilt shows up like an uninvited guest, whispering things like, "You're being selfish," or "You should do more." But I want you to hear me clearly. Self-respect is not selfish. Protecting your peace is not rude. Saying enough is not unkind. It's necessary. It's healthy. It's overdue. You can care about people deeply and still not allow them to drain you. You can be generous and still set boundaries. You can love your family without letting them pull you into every storm they create. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're not asking for your support. They're asking for your sacrifice. There's a big difference. Here's something else I want you to carry with you. The people who truly love you will never demand that you abandon yourself to make them comfortable. They will never make you feel guilty for needing rest, space, or solitude. The people who are meant for you will understand that your peace matters, that your time is sacred, and that your joy doesn't have to come last. But for that to happen, you have to draw the line. You have to let go of the belief that your worth is tied to your availability. You have to stop proving yourself to people who will never be satisfied no matter what you do. Because some people aren't looking to understand you. They're looking to control you. And the moment you stop letting them, that's when your real life begins. Letting go isn't easy, I know that. It means walking away from certain roles you've played your whole life. Maybe you were the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who held everything together. But here's the truth. Just because you carried it well doesn't mean it wasn't heavy. And just because you could hold it all doesn't mean you should keep doing it. There comes a time when we must set things down, not because we've given up, but because we've grown up. We've seen the cost. We've felt the drain. And we finally understand that real strength isn't about how much we carry, but how wisely we choose what not to carry anymore. So if your heart is tired from doing too much for too long, if your soul is craving space to just be, let this be your permission slip. You do not have to keep showing up for people who disappear when it's your turn to be held. You do not have to stay in conversations that leave you more confused than heard. You do not have to keep explaining your decisions to people who never ask how you're really doing. You don't have to prove your value by being exhausted. You've already proven your worth by being here, by making it through, by rising every time life tried to pull you under. That's enough. You are enough. And the more you believe that, the more your life begins to reflect it. You stop begging for scraps of affection. You stop settling for half-hearted effort. You stop shrinking in spaces that can't handle your fullness. Instead, you begin to attract peace. You begin to attract respect. You begin to attract the kind of love that doesn't require you to lose yourself in the process. It's amazing what happens when you stop chasing people who never intended to stay. Your energy comes back. Your laughter returns. Your days feel a little lighter. And in that quiet space where anxiety used to live, you find something even more powerful: clarity. You see yourself clearly again. Not through the lens of someone else's expectations, not through the guilt or shame you've carried for years, but through the eyes of someone who has lived, who has learned, and who is finally ready to be. So give yourself grace. Give yourself space. Give yourself the freedom to care less about things that don't bring you peace. Because the less you care about what drains you, the more you'll have to give to what lifts you. And that, my friend, is where happiness lives. Let's keep going. There's a quiet kind of strength that comes from letting go. Not the kind that's loud or flashy, but the kind that settles into your bones. The kind that whispers, "You've done enough. Now it's time to live." And maybe for the first time in your life, you actually start to believe it. You stop rushing. You stop apologizing. You stop waiting for someone else to tell you it's okay to be happy on your own terms. And when that shift happens, everything looks different. The things that once felt so urgent no longer seem to matter. The people whose approval used to keep you up at night slowly fade into the background. You start making decisions not from fear or guilt, but from calm, from clarity, from a place of knowing who you are and what you deserve. You begin to understand that peace isn't just a nice idea. It's a daily choice. A choice to stop picking up every burden that's tossed your way. A choice to stop answering every demand with a yes. A choice to stop letting other people's discomfort determine the course of your day. You've spent so many years making sure everyone else was okay. Now it's your turn. It's your turn to ask yourself the questions you've pushed aside for too long. What brings me peace? What brings me joy? What have I been denying myself just to keep the peace for others? These are not selfish questions. They are the foundation of a life well lived. And you deserve to live a life that feels like yours, not one that looks good from the outside, but leaves you empty inside. Some people might not understand the changes you're making. They might say you're pulling away or that you've changed. And you know what? They're right. You have changed. You've grown. You've learned that being available to everyone is a fast road to being there for no one, not even yourself. You've learned that your energy is not infinite, and that protecting it is not just wise, it's necessary. This stage of life is not a time to fade into the background. It's a time to come home to yourself, to reconnect with the things that make you feel alive, to rediscover passions that got lost in the noise of obligation. Whether it's painting, gardening, walking at sunrise, learning something new, or simply doing less, you get to choose now. You get to choose without guilt, without explanation, without asking for permission. And when you do, something remarkable happens. The weight lifts, the tension melts, and in that space, your real life begins to bloom. You stop trying to be liked and start being whole. You stop chasing and start receiving. You stop trying to fit in and start standing tall exactly as you are. Think about how far you've come, all the storms you've weathered, all the times you kept going when you didn't know how, all the pieces of yourself you gave away just to make things work. You've already proven your strength. Now it's time to prove your softness, to be gentle with yourself, to protect your heart the way you've protected everyone else's. Because at the end of the day, your greatest relationship is the one you have with yourself. You're the one who has walked through every chapter. You're the one who stayed, who endured, who loved even when it hurt. So treat yourself with that same loyalty, that same tenderness, that same grace. And don't wait for someone else to do it. Don't wait for an apology that may never come. Don't wait for approval that was never yours to earn in the first place. Don't wait for the world to slow down or people to finally understand. Start now. Start today. Start small if you have to, but start. Say no without guilt. Take a nap in the middle of the day. Stop explaining your choices. Speak kindly to yourself. Walk away from conversations that drain you. Let people misunderstand you and keep your peace anyway. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's freedom. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that is tired, hollow, or constantly second-guessing. You don't owe anyone the pieces of yourself you need to feel whole. And you certainly don't owe anyone your joy. That is yours to protect, yours to nurture, yours to reclaim. So when the world pulls at you, when guilt whispers in your ear, when the old patterns try to return, pause, take a breath. Remind yourself, I am not here to please everyone. I am here to live, fully, honestly, freely. And if there's one thing I hope you walk away with, it's this. The less you care about the opinions, the expectations, and the approval of people who don't feed your soul, the more space you create for the life that truly belongs to you. The less you care, the lighter you feel. And the lighter you feel, the more deeply you begin to live. So take this message to heart. You are not too old. It is not too late. And your happiness has not expired. This is your moment, not to prove, not to impress, but to simply be, to enjoy, to rest, to rise, to reclaim every part of yourself that you gave away trying to be enough. You were always enough. You've always been worthy. And the moment you believe that, that's when everything changes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And most of all, thank you for choosing you. If this message touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your story, your turning point, your enough is enough moment. And if you found value in this, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more encouragement and conversations like this one. Here's to peace over pressure, joy over judgment, and a life that finally feels like yours. Take care of your heart, protect your peace, and never forget, you were not born to be liked. You were born to be free.